We are now moving towards hearing from the Department of Industry, Science, Energy and Resources, Education, Skills and Employment, Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and IP Australia.
This one's okay.
Yeah, no one's up there this morning.
Thank you. While you're coming to the table, I'll read the formalities. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses and evidence has been given to you. I remind senators that the Senate's resolved that an officer of the Department of the Commonwealth or of a state shall not be asked to give opinions on matters of policy and should be given reasonable opportunity to refer questions asked of the officer to superior officers or to a minister. This resolution prohibits only questions asking for opinions on matters of policy and does not preclude questions asking for explanations of policies or factual questions about when or how they were adopted. Officers of these departments are reminded that any claim that it would be contrary to the public interest to answer a question must be made by a minister and should be accompanied by a statement setting out the reason for the claim. For the Hansard record, I'd now like to ask each witness in turn to state your full name and the capacity in which you appear. We might start on the left-hand side and
Mr. Cully.
thank you.
Peter Cully, Head of Small and Family Business Division, Department of Industry, Science, Energy and Resources.
Thank you.
Benedicta Jensen, First Assistant Secretary, Labour Market Strategy Division, Department of Education, Skills and Employment.
Bruce Wilson, Head of Industry Growth Division, Department of Industry, Science, Energy and Resources.
Good morning. Darren Atkinson, Acting General Manager, Advanced Technologies Branch, Department of Industry, Science, Energy and Resources.
Thank you. Is there an opening statement from any of you this morning?
A small statement, Senator, thank you. On behalf of the Department of Industry, Science, Energy and Resources, we were pleased to make a submission. I would just draw the committee's attention to the press release from the Minister for Industry, Science and Technology this morning regarding Holden's deregistration from the Automotive Transmission Scheme.
Could we be provided with a copy of that, Mr. Wilson?
Certainly.
Sorry, I have not seen it. It's this morning.
I haven't seen it yet either. But thank you for drawing it to our attention.
Thank you. I'm here with my colleagues, obviously, from Department of Education, Skills and Employment, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are you ready to kick off, Senator O'Neill?
Yeah, thank you very much. On the 20th, probably this is to the department, Mr. Wilson, that you're representing. On 26th of February, the Prime Minister and Minister Andrews met with the Holden car dealers in Canberra. At that meeting, according to the Prime Minister's Twitter account, Holden car dealers laid out their concerns to Minister Andrews and the government, and the government ensured that Holden dealers would get a fair deal. Did that meeting take place, Mr. Wilson, between Holden car dealers, the AADA and the Prime Minister and the Minister?
That's correct, Senator.
Okay, do you have any notes from that meeting?
No, we weren't present at the meeting and we don't have any copies of notes from that meeting.
Was anyone else from any of the other departments present? No. According to reports that I've received, at that meeting, a policy proposal for the Australian car dealers to have their own car dealership code was dismissed by Minister Andrews, as that would, in her view, cause car manufacturers to depart Australia. Have you any knowledge of that, Mr. Wilson, or anyone else who's here?
I'm not aware of comments made by Minister Andrews at that meeting. As I said, I wasn't present.
Has the Minister asked you to prepare anything with regard to the car dealership code?
Senator, what we have done, or what the government has done, is of course bring in amendments to the franchising code, an automotive schedule that sets out requirements, new regulatory requirements. This is the first time actually that such a initiative has been taken. It's the first automotive specific schedule to the franchising code.
We just heard that assessed by Mr Vortman as a small step but inadequate. Did Minister Andrews question the merits of having a standalone car dealership code?
The issue has been raised, I believe, by AADA and some others. The Minister had a number of roundtables with industry participants. It was considered not to be the best way forward, and in fact the Minister agreed and the government agreed to bring in the automotive schedule amendments to the franchise code.
Which, as I said, Mr Vortman from the sector has just indicated is inadequate. According to reports, on the 18th of June, a representative from the Holden car dealers emailed Minister Andrews letting her know that they hadn't received a reply from her office, her office, to their 24 emails over their past 3 months. Bearing in mind that this launched in February, 24 emails over 3 months and no response from the Minister. Did a representative from the Holden car dealers email the Minister on 18th of June?
Yes, Senator, and in fact the Holden deal, I think it's appropriate to look at the whole context here. The Holden Dealer Council, I believe, made something like 42 pieces of correspondence to the Minister and the Department. The Minister's office referred down to the Department, as is normal, quite a number, I think around 24 I think was the number, for appropriate action. And I was the officer that decided on that, and I looked at those emails, the vast majority of which really, Senator, were update emails. ADHC were updating quite a number of people, basically almost on a daily basis or weekly basis. I decided the content of those emails were more in the characterisation of daily updates, and didn't really have specific requests of the Minister that I considered and needed a specific response.
Okay, so
and
Mr
also
Wilson, you're taking
that
responsibility for the failure to respond.
for a decision not to reply, Senator.
I wonder, I won't waste my time with comment. I'm very, very concerned about that, given the state that the dealers were in between February and June. You knew there was a deadline in June. You received over 24 emails, which you personally determined wasn't worthy of response. According to further reports, a separate Holden car dealer emailed what appears to be all government members questioning the government's support of small business such as car dealers. Did a representative of the Holden car dealers email multiple government members on the 18th of June, including Minister Andrews?
I can't answer a question on a specific date, Minister. Senator. I'm happy to take that on notice and get back to you if you want.
Mr Wilson, can you really not recall that there was a reply all sent by this industry who were exasperated with the failure of the government to respond to their requests?
Senator, there were many emails moving
yes,
around.
Yes, there were, but
period.
was there one that was reply all that caused a furore within your department? Mr Atkinson might help.
Let me just...
Yes, Senator, there were some representations made on the 18th of June. I might also mention that there were some replies provided to the Holden Dealer Council. Minister Andrews did write back to them. The department also wrote to them. There were numerous phone calls made to the Dealer Council. I just wanted to just correct the record that no responses were provided to the Holden Dealer Council during that period.
Sorry, Senator, if you're referring to the 18th of June one as the Dealer Council's one where they were complaining about the lack of response, yes, that certainly was sent. Just to echo my colleague's comments, I don't think it's fair to characterise no response. We're well aware that the Dealer Council have been talking to both ministers' offices on a reasonably regular basis. And as I said...
Yes, but with respect, Mr Wilson, being aware of it and actually doing something to help these businesses across Australia are two very different things. On the 2nd of July, did Minister Andrews require a formal complaint from representatives, receive a formal complaint from representatives of the Holden car dealers?
We're not aware of that, Senator.
Well,
O'Neill.
according to an article in Australia, the Australian Today, reported by Greg Brown, this letter was sent to Minister Andrews. A Holden car dealer makes a formal complaint regarding the treatment that they received from a staff member of Minister Andrews. And the representative of Holden dealers notes in their letter that Holden dealers, because of their unanswered emails, felt like they were being ignored. The staff member who responded to the complainant was told, "I can show you what that's like," referring to continuing to be ignored. In the same letter, Holden dealer goes on to state that they felt like no one was engaging with them. Did the letter contain those statements, Mr Wilson?
I haven't seen a copy of that letter, Senator, and again, I don't think it's fair to characterise that no one was supporting Holden dealers or considering their requests. We're very well aware of their position, their concerns, and the government, as noted in several press releases and letters to Holden,
Yep.
have both ministers, Andrews and Cash, were representing dealer concerns and insisting on a fair outcome.
So I think every small business in Australia should be very, very aware that when this government says they will engage with you, when they say they will support you, you can't trust them at their word. You can send email after email and it will be ignored by somebody, and when you make a complaint, they'll pretend that it doesn't exist. That's what's going on in terms of support for small businesses in this country.
I disagree, Senator. We did not.
I'm sure you do.
We did not ignore their emails.
There was the letter that I'm referring to. Did this letter, which I know you must have seen at some point of time, CC Yaron Finkelstein, the Principal Private Secretary to the Prime Minister?
I can't, it's possible, but I can't comment unless I had the document in front of me.
Mr Wilson, did Mr Finkelstein contact the Department of Industry of the Minister Andrews about this formal complaint?
He certainly didn't contact the Department of Industry that I'm aware of. I do not know whether he's contacted the Minister's office.
So it's a formal complaint and you are not aware of that, Mr Wilson, is that correct?
That's right, I'm not aware of that contact.
Why didn't the Department of Industry contact Holden dealers prior to this formal complaint so they felt like they were actually being heard?
As I said, Senator, we're well aware that the Minister's office had been talking to the Holden dealer councils through the process, and it didn't seem necessary for us to contact them on top of that.
In the explanatory memorandum for these changes to the franchise code, it states that there was stakeholder engagement with dealers across Australia. As part of that engagement, did the car dealership sector propose any changes, such as the option for arbitration to resolve disputes?
No, Senator. Not in the consultation process on the proposed amendments to the franchise code. Those proposals came in subsequently.
So, are you aware of this report, the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Corporations and Financial Services Fairness in Franchising?
I am, Senator, and I'm aware that in that process they proposed something, but not in the automotive schedule.
Oh, okay. So it was unwise of them to think that you would actually know what was already recommended, that they had already gone out and publicly advocated. That was written into this document. The committee recommends that dispute resolution scheme under Franchising Code of Conduct remain mandatory and enhanced to include the option of binding arbitration with the capacity to award remedies, compensation, interest and costs if mediation is unsuccessful.
So, Senator, that process, which Mr Cully can talk to, is a separate process to the process that was undertaken for the automotive specific.
Okay, so your
process.
defence is the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing, but it's the same department.
The left hand did know what the right hand was doing.
Well, how did you not know that they wanted arbitration?
I thought your question related to the automotive schedule.
Yeah, well, there's
Senator.
a significant overlap of those things.
They did not request it in the automotive schedule.
In the explanatory memorandum, it states that it considered the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Corporations and Financial Services report into franchising and its recommendations when you were drafting the franchising code in respect to car dealers. A significant recommendation was what I've just read to you. Why didn't the government consider the car dealers' request for arbitration and the bipartisan recommendations from the franchising report by offering arbitration as an option for dispute resolution when it made the announcement on the 1st of June for reforms in the car industry?
The announcement on the 1st of June related to the automotive schedule that was attached to the franchising code. We made it clear to the industry that Any proposals that related to the amendments to the franchising code would be considered in the franchising reform process.
So even though they were screaming at everybody who would listen, even though the whole sector, 185 dealerships across this country that employ thousands of people, were screaming, please give us a chance in the fight against General Motors. Give us some help. They ended up getting a little support from the ACCC Commissioner, Rod Sims, who forced Holden into mediation. The mediation, from everything we've heard, was entered into absolutely without good faith by Holden. And then failure from this department led, at the very, very last moment, on the 28th of June, June, Senator Cash finally says, the government, in a media release, we're going to help you, we'll tell General Motors they need to go to arbitration. And nothing happened, did it? Because there was nothing put into the code. There was no real pressure applied to General Motors because the government failed to act on this report from March 2019. If the government had done something, they would have been in a very different situation, wouldn't they?
Given the roles of the franchising code, the answer to that question is no, that the arbitration would not have assisted in this particular arbitration would not have
Mr.
been
Cully,
possible
with
in this
respect,
particular
it wouldn't be possible. It would not have assisted, or it would not be possible.
Sorry, Senator, I should have clarified. Would not have been possible.
It wouldn't have been possible, no, because the legislation and the regulation doesn't allow for that. Is that correct?
It's because there are limitations on what the Commonwealth can do in relation to requiring arbitration.
And that's another conversation we should have at another time. But clearly, Minister Cash must have thought there was a chance of arbitration. Otherwise, why did she put out a press release saying, the government's on your side, 185 businesses, we're going to look after your people and we'll make General Motors go to arbitration. But that did not happen. I can only think of it as disingenuous, given your answer, Mr. Cully.
Senator, Minister Cash wrote to the dealers and to Holden to request them to voluntarily agree to arbitration. So parties at any time can agree to arbitration voluntarily. There are limits on what the Commonwealth can do to compel people to arbitrate, and that would have applied in these circumstances.
But the government have done it in other circumstances with other industries. That was pointed out by Mr. Vortman. In fact, they've done it for the dairy industry, haven't they?
No, they haven't, Senator. I think Mr. Vortman was not quite correct on that. What they've done in the Dairy Code is said that parties to the Dairy Code can voluntarily put into their agreement that they will abide by arbitration, but it's not the Commonwealth saying that they must arbitrate.
You didn't help the Holden dealers out by offering that to them, did you?
Well, that's what Minister Cash did. Minister Cash suggested that they enter into voluntary arbitration.
Okay, and
in all
it didn't work.
circumstances, it requires both parties to agree, whether they write it into an agreement or whether they consent by any other means, but it requires consent from both parties.
If I can go to the RIS for the new mandatory dairy code, which came into effect on the 1st of January, one of the key features it established was this arbitration process to give the Small Business Ombudsman power to assist in dispute resolution. Does the Department of Industry acknowledge the imbalance in bargaining power that exists between car dealers and manufacturers?
Senator, yes, that was principally one of the reasons for the amendment to the franchise code to help address that power imbalance.
Did the government consider giving ASBFAO the option to resolve disputes, including arbitration, in relation to the reforms announced on the 1st of June for car dealers?
As I said, Minister, in the automotive schedule consultations, the issue of arbitration wasn't raised. We understand that the franchising reform process is looking at arbitration processes. There are different models for it, but as Mr. Cully has indicated, the Commonwealth has legal, constitutional restrictions on what it can do in terms of arbitration. Now, parties can agree to undertake an arbitrated process, and I believe that's probably where Minister Cash was heading. It wasn't appropriate to have an arbitration process inside the automotive schedule. It's an issue that should be considered in the context of the code. We are looking in discussions with the industry, the different components of the industry at the moment, to look at a voluntary process of principles for compensation, and the issue of arbitration has been raised inside that process, and that's being currently considered by all parties. It is being proposed as a voluntary set of principles around compensation, and we're in early stages at this point discussing it with all the various parties.
One final question,
Senator,
if I
you
can.
need to conclude your questions. Thank you.
So the Prime Minister's Twitter account stated on the 26th of February that the government will be supporting the Holden dealers by watching very closely to see that they get a fair deal. And if you speak to any of those Holden car dealers, they're going to tell you that they did not get a fair deal, that they were forced to accept an unfair deal that was not negotiated in good faith. And this is shown by the department receiving a formal complaint about the treatment towards the Australian small businesses, unanswered emails and consistently ignoring proposals from the car dealers to help them resolve the matter. How many times did the Prime Minister, who said he was watching very closely, ask for updates or briefings on the tsunami of power that was washing over them as GM basically took out 185 dealers in Australia? How many times did the Prime Minister ask you for an update?
Senator, it's not normal for the Prime Minister's or his office to request directly to another department updates or briefings.
Well, why would he say then to these hard-working business people who went in good faith,
The witness.
when he said, I'll be watching very closely to see that you get a good deal? What does that actually mean? Does it mean anything?
Can you stop browbeating the witness, please?
It means, Senator, that while we were not directly requested, I know that his department was providing his office with updates. I know that the Holden Dealer Council, AADA, was certainly providing his office with regular updates. Many of those emails that I talked to before copied his office in, so he and his office were aware of it. Again, I take issue with the characterisation that the government did nothing to support small business. The Minister wrote to Holden several times, Minister Cash wrote to Holden several times. The ACCC has an ongoing investigation, and given that there is an ongoing investigation with the ACCC, that means that the department obviously will respect that investigation, and that's into GM's conduct, and ACCC I know is on later, and you can ask them questions about that investigation. We're also aware that this is a commercial dispute between Holden and the 187 dealers.
Between General Motors?
Between General Motors and the 187 dealers. It was appropriate to let that play out and let that go on, I believe, before any consideration of direct intervention. It's not a wise idea, and nor is it normal practice for government to get involved in what is essentially a commercial dispute. And at the end of the day...
What's the point of having any rules and regulations for this industry then if the government aren't involved? The Prime Minister involved himself. You said he's been getting updates. You said that he was...
Senator O'Neill, I need to move on with the call.
It's entirely unsatisfactory. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to step back a bit just in terms of, and I do want to focus on General Motors and the support that has been provided to General Motors by the taxpayers of Australia. My understanding is that there have been large amounts of money that have been provided to General Motors, if not in the tens of millions, the hundreds of millions, could even be in the billions over the years to support General Motors. Are you able to expand and remind me of what support has been provided by the Commonwealth of Australia on behalf of the taxpayers to General Motors over the years, please?
Certainly, Senator, and I'll ask my colleague to dive in if I miss some technical points now. What I can say is that I can confirm the Minister's statement in her press release where she expressed disappointment about GM Holden's decision to retire, that the company had received over $2 billion in assistance since 2001, and that's under, in effect, two schemes which had several rounds in each: the Automotive Competitive
Investment Scheme, yes,
yep,
right, ACES.
Yes. And the Automotive Transformation Scheme. I'm not, at this point I can't break down the amounts paid under each component of the scheme. I have to take that on notice.
Could you please?
Yep.
Could you please? Just in relation, I noticed, just reading the Minister's press release, the line, Australian taxpayers have given this multinational company more than $2 billion in financial assistance over recent years, and you're going to break that down on notice in terms of that $2 billion, and it's still decided without consultation to wind up the Holden brand in Australia. So you can confirm that General Motors made this decision without consulting with the Commonwealth Government?
I can confirm that.
Okay. Is that something you would have expected, that General Motors would have consulted with the federal government, considering the financial support that has been given to General Motors over the years?
I don't particularly want to comment on the way General Motors did or didn't proceed about their decision. That's something you can ask them. My experience, Senator, it is not uncommon for companies to make decisions and then inform governments, sometimes giving governments a little bit of advance notice, but it's not, in my experience, it's not common for them to consult around the decision to a business decision like that.
Even with the considerable financial support that has been given. So, just in relation to, I suppose, generally, and Mr. Cully, I suppose this question might go to you. What support is there for small business at the moment? You know, a lot of these Holden dealers are dealing with the decision made by General Motors. They're also dealing with coronavirus and so forth. But what support is there for these small businesses across Australia that is available from the government?
Thank you, Senator. So obviously, in terms of assistance with disputes under the franchising code, there is mechanisms there that include. There's also the government established the Australian Small Business and Family Enterprise Ombudsman, which provides a range of assistance to small business, including in this context. In the COVID-19 context, there's obviously the range of support measures that are in place, whether it be JobKeeper, whether it be tax cuts, whether it be the assistance to small business, sort of range of areas through hotlines and others to assist them at the moment. So I think there's a very broad suite of measures across a whole range of governments and different sectors.
Okay, Chair. Just looking at the time, I do have a number of other questions, but to be a team player, I think Senator Faruqi might have some questions. So I might put my questions on notice and hand back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McGrath. Senator Faruqi.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Senator McGrath, and good morning, everyone. I just want to explore this question of public funding for the multinational corporations a little bit more. And we know from the Minister Andrews' media release that $2 billion plus have been provided to GM Holden for many years. And yet they did shut up shop and, and are leaving Australia, I guess. So I want to ask from you all, what do you think could have been done better, given that there was so much funding provided that could guarantee longevity of this particular industry in Australia? Would like better adaptation to the market, or any lessons that the department has learned to improve the situation in future?
Well, Senator, I might give a brief answer to that. I guess the transitions that we've seen in both auto manufacturing and in the car sales markets have been driven by markets and consumer preferences. I don't believe that the governments of the day could have done much more than they did to maintain manufacturing in Australia, given global pressures and economic trends and the cost of manufacturing in Australia relative to other countries. I do note that the sales market in Australia is a highly competitive market. We have something like over 60 manufacturers with 400 models in Australia. It's That's more than I understand in the US. So it's a highly competitive, highly diverse market. Australian consumers benefit from a highly efficient system and the competition is at the heart of that. What we're seeing over the last few years, and Holden is the lead example of this, is the impact of consumer preferences and cost and changing tastes in vehicles, and that will mean that some manufacturers and models move in and out, and that's to be expected in a highly competitive market. I think that's delivered consumers considerable benefit, but it does put, as we've seen, obviously a lot of pressure on the dealership component of the market, and you know, you've heard from AADA and others on that, and I won't speculate on that, except that it is a very dynamic market.
Sure, I do understand that, but a lot of people I speak to also do talk about adapting to the market. Obviously, industries adapt to the market, other car manufacturers have, and from what I hear in general is that Holden didn't, like smaller cars or electric vehicles or more fuel-efficient cars. So what I'm asking is, would government, or the industry's your department, looking at ways of how that could be improved when billions of dollars are handed over to multinational corporations?
I might comment on this. Senator, our department has recently released a report evaluating the impact of the auto industry structural adjustment program, particularly for workers and worker transition. And that report really shows that there's a lot that went well for workers through the assistance provided. Now, this was assistance that included close collaboration with Ford, Holden, Toyota and the Victorian and South Australian governments. And it did things such as creating transition centres for workers at the Elizabeth plant in Adelaide, and also for workers affected in Victoria. So the sort of main outcomes from the report finds that 12 months after losing their jobs, 83% of workers remained within the jobs market, and of these, 85% of workers were working again, with 4% of them starting their own business. Now, if you compare that to the general outcome for retrenched workers, it actually compares very favourably. So in the general population with retrenchments, 81% of retrenched workers stay in the jobs market, but only 60% are working again after 12 months. Whereas in the case of the Auto Industry Structural Adjustment Program, 85% of workers were working again after 12 months. So we're actually taking the lessons from the auto industry program and reflecting it in the sort of best practice advice that we have on our website. And part of that is the early intervention so that workers prior to retrenchment are getting career counselling and training. For example, again with the Auto Industry Structural Adjustment Program, between 63% to 75% of workers within the car companies undertook some form of training, and that included, with the vast majority being licensing and skill sets, and that's really reflecting the appetite of the workers to retrain. The skills recognition was also very important, so that's another thing that we include in our best practice, because often these workers were in the same plant for, say, 20 years. They had a lot of skills, whether it's in quality control, that weren't formally recognised. So that sort of recognition of the skills that they did have really helped them as a stepping stone into new employment. So that's just a couple of examples of the evaluations we've done.
Thank you. When did the government and the department find out that Holden were shutting up shop? So we know that they made the announcement on the 17th, 15 minutes before that is when most people found out, the dealers associations and all. So what did the government and your department find out about it?
Thanks, Senator. We found out on the same day, and in fact only a very small amount of time before the actual announcement was made. I can't comment on exact. It was, you know, within an hour or two of, if not smaller, than the actual announcement.
Yes, that was the same for our department as well. It was the same as for DISA. With DISA, it was the same day. Yes.
And you said earlier that there isn't a precedence for consultation when decisions like these are made by corporations, even when they are funded so much by the government. But given, let's accept that, which I don't, but even letting governments know at the time that they are about to make a public announcement, do you think somewhere in the relationship between government and corporations, and especially corporations which are provided government funding, that needs to change to have a better arrangement of when governments are informed?
Senator, I guess I would just draw your attention to the reaction of the Prime Minister and the Minister for Industry, Science and Technology on the day, and their extreme disappointment at the lack of consultation and the decision to pull out.
But will something change based on that in terms of regulation or how your department operates?
Well, I guess we would like more consultation on decisions such as this, and various car manufacturers have given both the industry and us more warning on their proposed changes. But you can't regulate consultation, this sort of consultation, that sort of doesn't work.
Okay. Even though you provide funds, billions and billions of dollars. Anyway, I'll move on. I have a few broader questions based on the submission that you have made. And one of them is about the Automotive Innovation Labs Fund. I think you said there's 10 million allocated there. And you mentioned there are 14 projects. I'm just wondering if electric vehicles or autonomous cars at all are being looked at within those 14 projects.
Certainly, Senator, those new technologies are always in scope for programs like this. What we're trying to encourage with that program was to grow the aftermarket sector in the components that it develops by giving them greater access to R&D facilities to test and prototype their new products. And certainly what's in the mix in those development of new products are those new technologies that you're talking about around autonomous and electric vehicles. So certainly some of their applications go to that. And as I said, that's certainly where we're trying to encourage the automotive sector, is to grow those capabilities in global supply chains to making components for global vehicles.
So some of those 14 projects are specifically focused on EVs and autonomous cars?
Well, I'd have to take that, sorry, Senator,
okay.
Take that specificity on notice. So.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Also, I tallied up some of the funding for manufacturing initiatives that you've listed in Appendix 1 of your report. I think from my count, it totals to about $164 million. Given that there is a lot of discussion, and I think very valid discussion on the revival of manufacturing, especially after the pandemic, that seems to me like a very small amount. Do you know how this compares to investment provided by government, let's say, in the past? Has it increased at all?
Well, Senator, I mean, I'm not going to comment on the size of the funding. That's a decision by government. But I think it's important to draw the distinction between funding for the manufacturing component or some of the manufacturing funds and the general automotive industry support programs. And when you look at that, there's been significant money provided to the automotive industry, including the downstream engineering sections. And in fact, the retention of the sort of downstream manufacturing and engineering skills in Australia has been quite a success story coming out of the decision to wind up manufacturing. Does that answer?
Senator, I might add as well that since the closure announcements by the three companies, the government put in place a $155 million growth fund. That was followed by a $100 million advanced manufacturing fund, and more recently by the $50 million manufacturing modernisation fund. There have been multiple other programs along the way, and certainly lots of other support, as Mr Wilson says, for the supply chain. But they were just the sort of key milestone products. So I wasn't sure where your figure came from, but we're happy to look at that and come back to you if you need any more clarification, or we can provide you with a full list of the government programs for automotive and also manufacturing more generally.
Yeah, it's in your Appendix 1, but
Okay.
I'll move on from that. So with these funding initiatives listed in Appendix 1, is there an emphasis on, and I'm talking about the automotive industry as well as other industries, is there an emphasis on cleaner production, green manufacturing, or using renewable energy?
Certainly the government and our programs are very interested in those particular aspects, Senator, and there's a electric vehicle strategy under development which will sit with the technology investment roadmap Minister Taylor, I believe, has launched. But inside those schemes, we're certainly keen to encourage all those aspects that you've talked about.
Senator, we'd also note. Oh.
Is there any specifically set for that? I know you're interested and you're encouraging, but how do you actually make sure that the funds are attached to changes like that?
Senator, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, for example, are one part of government that funds aspects of electric vehicles. There's also there are other strategies in place as well, but the CEFC probably is the primary focus for funding for some of those new technologies.
This is your last question, Senator Faruqi.
So my question is transitioning workers, and you mentioned earlier in your responses that they have funds and workers have been transitioned once, industries start to close down. So I'm also interested in how proactively the department thinks about transition. So not necessarily when an industry has decided to close down or a corporation has decided to close down, but actually thinking about the future and looking at industries that, are becoming stranded industries, for example, the coal industry or others. How does the government plan for that, or do you, before it happens?
Right. Senator, so just so I understand your question is more about how does the department help industry to plan for potential transitions in the future? That's really the question? So as you may be aware, the government recently stood up the National Skills Commission, and part of the mandate for the commission is to keep building on prior departmental research into new areas of employment and skills in demand. And as an example of how that's practically being used at the moment with the impact of COVID, is that the department has created a COVID-19 employer response unit, and the role of that unit is to work both with employers who are dealing with large recruitment demands due to pressures, whether it's around healthcare or logistics and the like, and also working with companies that are anticipating retrenchments so that the department can assist in matching retrenched workers to areas in demand. And we also draw on and work closely with the National Skills Commission and stood up the online Jobs Hub earlier in March. And the Jobs Hub is a great source of information, particularly for job seekers who are looking at where in their local area are the critical skills shortages, and also where they can access training to transition into those areas. And the Commission will also continue to improve information available for business to help them with their workforce planning, so that they can look at how skills are changing and what they need to do to plan for that and improve their capability on the ground. So that's just a few examples of the work that's going on collaboratively between DESI and the National Skills Commission.
We'll need to break shortly, but Labor senators, did you have a couple more questions?
I do, Chair. I get feedback whenever I talk. Does everyone else hear that feedback, or is it just my phone?
We can just hear you.
Does it? Hey?
We can just hear you, Senator Farrell. We can't hear
all right.
feedback.
That's all right then. Yeah, no, good. Excellent. Thank you. Look, I had a couple of questions, Chair, that I'd like to ask the witnesses. And just to preface that, the ACCC market study in 2018 recommended that car manufacturers be required to share technical information with independent mechanics on the commercially fair and reasonable terms and subject to safeguards for sensitive information. And I know that terrific trade union, the Metal Workers Union in South Australia, has been supporting the policy to do that. And I just want to know where the government is up to in that regard. And my question is, in the current time frame on the mandatory automotive services and repair, what is the current time frame on the mandatory automotive services and repair data sharing law? Where is it up to? And I know Minister Sukkar made some remarks about proceeding with that, but can you tell us where we're up to in that regard?
Senator, certainly not trying to be unhelpful, but that is being taken forward by the Department of the Treasury, so I'll have to refer your question on notice to that. I know it is ongoing and they are working on it, but I don't have a time frame, but I'm sure they can respond to you.
Well, that I suppose goes to my second question. Has Treasury engaged with employment and industry departments on that scheme? It doesn't sound like they have.
No, they have, Senator. We have been engaged. I just don't know what the delivery time frame for the Department of Treasury is. So that part I'll have to come back to you on. But we've certainly been engaged.
Okay. Well, can you tell us in what capacity and when you've had those engagements?
Senator, we'll have to take that detail on notice, but certainly as the program as the work has developed, we've been in regular contact. I understand there was interdepartmental committee discussions around that, as well as the consultation process. So we've certainly been engaged as the Department of Industry with an interest in automotive during the development of it since 2019 when it was announced. But if you're looking for a list of dates for when that consultation occurred with us, we'd have to take that on notice. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, perhaps you can help me with this question. What advice has the department given about the impact of the scheme on the automotive parts manufacturers in Australia?
Senator, could you please just explain again which scheme you're talking about? I didn't quite catch it the first time, I'm sorry. Which scheme?
The mandatory automotive services and repair data sharing law that the government was proposing.
Look, Senator, from DESI's perspective, I need to take that on notice. I'm not sure.
Sorry,
Yeah. We haven't. Well, we don't think we've engaged. Yeah.
You haven't engaged on that one.
Not that we were, but I will take that on notice and just double check because I don't always know the detail. Yeah.
All right.
In terms of the Department of Industry, we also engage with the Automotive Aftermarkets Association, who we know haven't. Yeah, hello.
No, I haven't gone anywhere. I'm right here.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yes, sorry, it's the Department of Industry, and we do engage regularly with the Automotive Aftermarkets Association, who I understand are on being called before their hearing this afternoon. But we know that that they've been consulted regularly. So the impact of the scheme on the aftermarket and the parts sector, as you outline, is being considered by the government through that process.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Farrell. We're now going to have to conclude.
Can I just check some evidence that we've
Yes.
received this morning for its accuracy? Firstly, could you confirm or provide on notice a copy of the letter that Ms Andrews received from the Council, the Australian Holden Dealer Council, where the council representative wrote that it was obvious the government favoured franchisors over franchisees? You indicated you were not aware of that letter.
Is that the letter of 2 July?
I'm not sure of the date. I'm going off the report in the paper.
Well, I can't confirm that letter if I don't know the date of it, Senator.
So that is what is asserted in this article. So could you provide a copy of that, please, for the committee? The other thing I want to take you to is your evidence where I asked you the question in the explanatory memorandum for these changes to the franchising code. It states there was stakeholder engagement with dealers across Australia. As part of that engagement, did the car dealership sector propose any changes needed, such as an option for arbitration to resolve disputes? Your response was no, Senator, not in the consultation process on the proposed amendments to the franchise code. These proposals came in after. Can I just take you to this document? The Australian Automotive Dealer Association, a submission to the Department of Industry and Innovation and Science on the 5th of September 2019. I can have a copy provided there to the Secretariat. Option 2F, the risk correctly notes that there would be no regulatory burden resulting from this change. It's worth noting an effective multi-party dispute resolution process, which includes compulsory arbitration, and that features penalties equivalent to those available for breaches of the ACL would likely prevent significant numbers of disputes from clogging the civil courts in every Australian jurisdiction. That is at odds with your answer, Mr Wilson.
Well, I'll have... Sorry, Dan.
Senator, I might take that one. Our discussions with the automotive sector during the consultations, yes, dispute resolution did come up quite regularly, but it was in the context of multi-party dispute resolution, and what they were seeking was to address the power imbalance. They wanted to make sure that not just one franchisee who might struggle to get mediation with the manufacturer. They wanted multi-party mediation. So that's what we put in the 1 June amendments, was to ensure that all parties have access to multi-party mediation. So that was the focus during the consultations with respect rather than arbitration.
So, Mr Atkinson, that is the case, and they certainly made the point that they sought protection because they didn't want General Motors or any other major car industry company to take them out, pick them off one at a time, really. That's what they said.
No, I understand.
But your evidence suggested that they did not ask for arbitration, yet here it is in black and white, that they asked for this as far back as September 2019, and they made submissions to the other committee, which delivered its report in March 2019, yet Holden found themselves in this situation because there was no government response to this request. You picked one bit. Don't pick us off one at a time, but you didn't give them what they asked about arbitration.
With respect, we also assessed the options through the regulatory impact statement as well, and so where the regulations for 1 June landed were what were the ones that were recommended through the consultation process and supported by the regulatory impact statement.
So you are aware that they asked for arbitration or not?
I don't believe they asked for arbitration through the RIS consultation process. I take the point that it's in the...
The RIS correctly notes, it says.
I take your point that it's in the 2019 document, but through the RIS process, I wasn't aware that the issue of arbitration was raised. We certainly did get the issue of multi-party dispute resolution, and that's in the 1 June amendments.
Do you think they changed their mind, Mr Wilson?
I'm just relaying to you, Senator, what was raised to us in that process.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. If there are further questions, they'll need to be put on notice. I do note, I just wanted to clarify that you'll be able to answer Senator O'Neill's question regarding the letter. Yes. Thank you. I know that our representatives from General Motors are now online. We will need to take just a 3 or 4 minute break though, if that's okay. And if you don't mind waiting on the line, it's okay to wander away from your post for a couple of minutes, but we will be back very shortly.